and welcome to the Red Barrels podcast. It's still going. They haven't stopped us yet. In fact, now we're up to episode 16. It's the 16th of all episodes. That's how many bits there are for the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive. That's a gaming fact. Yeah, there you go.
Oh my
There you go.
God.
Can't say you don't learn anything. Exactly. It's kismet. It's kismet. Everyone's saying it. But as you've heard a little bit from them, it's not, as always, it's not just me. Let's just say first, it's Ed. Say hello, Ed.
Hello, Ed. How are you, everyone?
Exactly.
I hope you're all enjoying yourselves.
I'm getting him out of the way because it's the return of the conquering hero. Sofie's back. Sofie.
Hello, everyone. I have been on not hiatus. I've been away. Been in South Africa visiting my family. It's been very nice and warm and lovely. And I needed a break.
Yeah, can't blame him. Can't blame him.
You know,
Can't blame him.
they were really getting on my nerves once every 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
it's getting enough.
Welcome back.
I needed a break. Went to a different
in the
continent
end,
in order to
she
get
came
one.
crawling back because she couldn't help herself.
Yeah.
So yeah. Who's laughing now?
Yeah.
Who's laughing now? So
Ha ha ha.
I think we are, and the audience are, because it's so entertaining. That's the answer to that question. We've got just a great podcast, haven't we, guys? Yeah.
Who needs audience reviews when you've got Alex's summary of the quality of the podcast?
Exactly. I you know what? I'm going to give us 5 stars. Yeah. I think we've earned it. We've earned it. Would the
Oh, wow,
audience give us 5 stars?
It's unexpected.
Should they go onto iTunes and Spotify and review
know.
us with like a number between 4, like the upper limit of 4, like maybe a bit more than 4 and 5, somewhere between those values? You know, it's not for us to say, but we're just making
It
suggestions.
would be really nice to know how you guys feel, you know.
Yeah.
It's
But
important to
we're
communicate.
going to kind of get straight into it this time because it's not just a return episode for Sofie. It's also a special episode in other ways because that's right. It's the Silkstravaganza. We're all here to talk about Hollow Knight Silksong, the game of the moment everyone's talking about. I don't even really think we kind of planned this out as like a real kind of a episode we had in advance. It just turned out that me and Ed couldn't help ourselves playing this game. And then so Sofie got in on the action. So we've all played it. And that's what we're going to talk about. Silksong. Silksong, Hollow Knight Silksong for its full name, is, as you might have guessed by the name, the sequel to Hollow Knight, a game that came out, I think, in 2017, off the top of my head. But long-awaited game. It's been in development for a long time. Finally, it's out. Came out after a lot of people were starting to convince themselves it wasn't real. It was never coming. But then, as we mentioned on a previous episode, it got announced, it got shown off at Gamescom, and then a few days later, they put out an official announcement. And the announcement was, it's coming out on the 4th of September, a date that has now passed. It was the day after we recorded our last podcast, and so we've had 2 whole weeks to just go at it with this game. As a result, I will tell you now, dear listener, none of us have finished this game. Some are further than others. I'm the furthest, it seems, but even I think I'm quite a long way away from finishing this game. So maybe we'll come back to talk about it when we have. But for now, what are everyone's initial impressions of it? Why don't I go to you, Ed?
Quite hard, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the word on everyone's. That's the word on everyone's lips. I've more or less tried to avoid Silksong discourse just because I want, like, I don't play that many games when they first come out. So most games I've already got kind of an idea of what's going to happen. So I thought this was a kind of an opportunity for me to go in more or less completely blind. Obviously, I've played Hollow Knight as I've said on previous podcasts, so I knew what probably the vibe was going to be. But even I've managed to pick up that the discourse is that the game's really hard.
Yes.
Is it too hard? Yeah, probably. It's probably a bit too hard for my personal taste. I mean, I think we can go into specifics about the ways in which it's hard, I think, because some of those are where the real issues are for me with the game. Overall, I mean, I am enjoying the game. I do like the game. I do like quite hard games. Again, for comparison's sake, in this period, one of the reasons why I've not got so far in Silksong, I'm probably about a quarter of the way through, according to how long to beat, is I've finished Dark Souls in the last week as well. So it was, another hard game.
Really testing yourself.
Exactly. But that provided an useful comparison because those are both like quite
Putting
hard
yourself
games,
through.
and I think there are ways in which Dark Souls manages its difficulty in a way that's more effective than Silksong, and made me feel more positively towards that game than I've ended up feeling about Silksong so far. But it's still got the vibe of Hollow Knight, which I enjoy. The vibe of Hollow Knight, I enjoy the aesthetic of Hollow Knight. I know in the past, Alex, you've mentioned that you haven't enjoyed the vibe of Hollow Knight so much, just aesthetically. You didn't like the sprites. I think you mentioned on a previous
Yeah,
one.
no, not particularly. I think these ones are better. But why don't you describe for our listeners what the vibe of Hollow Knight / Silksong is?
Yeah, so the sort of aesthetic vibe of Hollow Knight, I'll describe like how it makes you feel more than like what exactly it looks like. For me, there's a sort of a mournfulness to it. It's got really, in my opinion, like really soft, like nice, sort of slightly mournful, but like eerie music some of the time, but also kind of relaxing. Like it's in that kind of vibe, which is an aesthetic I like. It's usually got quite dark backgrounds and like fairly bright-ish characters that sort of contrast against the backgrounds quite nicely. In the world, stuff's, I don't know, it feels kind of old, would you say? There's always a vibe of you're somewhere that used to be better than it currently is, and you're walking through worlds that seem kind of run down, and sort of something vaguely tragic has befallen the world that you're occupying, and that there's like a bittersweetness to playing Hollow Knight and Silksong. And yeah, so that's what I mean when I say I really like the sort of aesthetic, the vibe of the games. It's just quite, the coward's way out is to say atmospheric, but it is really atmospheric. I can't. Yeah, I mean, what is it that you're not such a fan of, Alex?
I quite like the general vibe as well, and I would say I actually prefer graphically Silksong to the original Hollow Knight. My main issue with it is the sprites, is that all the character and stuff. They has a very kind of flash animation look to it. They're so basic. I mean, they're like what's a hornet? The main character is meant to be a spider, and I'm like, there's literally no way you could know she was a spider by looking at her. She's like nothing like a bug at all, really. And it's so basic. I literally did watch some stuff about like the making of Hollow Knight and this, and like this is a game made by a team, mainly two guys. There's like a third guy they got for tech support, basically. And then there's a composer who does the music, and that's like the whole team pretty much. I mean, I'm sure there's like they have had some amount of outside help, but like that's almost all of it. So like all the art is done by one guy, and I feel mean, criticizing him because he doesn't, considering that he does an incredible job. I think the backgrounds are generally good, but they do kind of blend into each other. They're like quite indistinct to a lot of it. But the characters, literally the way these guys first met up is that they made like a game jam. They made a flash game that got put out on Newgrounds back in the day, and it literally had as its main character the character from Hollow Knight. It's like the same, almost exactly the same sprite. I mean, it's not. Yeah, I don't think it's in like Hollow Knight lore, but it's literally the same character, and they just reused it, and it kind of looks like. I think like a lot, like the Hollow Knight character, for instance, is like a quite good aesthetic concept, but it's just all the very better. Like a lot of the characters in both these games have faces that are just like round white ovals, and that's like 90% of it. And I just think I don't know, it just rubs me the wrong way. I can't really put my finger on what I don't like about it. So that's probably my biggest issue with these games, that I don't really like the way they look very much. But I think
I like the
yeah.
aesthetic, yeah.
It's definitely a me thing. Clearly, the wider world disagrees with me.
Yeah, I like the aesthetic. I like obviously I haven't played Hollow Knight. I've only played Silksong. I think I've seen a little bit of people playing Hollow Knight, like mostly on Twitch. So I'm kind of familiar with how it looks. To me, in my mind, it seems a lot more black and white, and Silksong seems to use a couple more browns and some sort of reds in the color palette. But again, that's completely like just sort of one or two encounters with the game. I really like the sound design. I think that really stuck out to me. So I like the music, and also just the sort of sounds of like the footsteps in the environment. I like how soft-footed Hornet it appears to be. There's that one environment like right at the beginning of the game where there's like bells everywhere, and you just happen to step on some bells that are like strewn across the floor. I just loved that. I did it a few times just because I really enjoyed the sound of it. I just walked back and forth over the bells, and I also do really like, obviously, very classic sort of indie game, the repeated sounds used for the characters, but especially the
Yeah.
ones that sing, like the character that right at the beginning who's trying to sing to the door or to get it to
He's great.
open. And also the character that you then buy things from as well, the sort of singing there. Just really gorgeous and sort of strange and ethereal, really helped build the world for me. It felt obviously very unfamiliar for me, but it really kind of helped build the world for me. I think my first thought was like, oh, I'd read like a I feel like this could make a really good children's book, this sort of environment and the vibe of it. And I was like, I would read it.
Yeah, you're right. It does have a vibe
So,
like that. I never thought.
yeah, like
Mm.
like a fable
Yeah.
almost. Feels sort of fabulistic.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I think there's a dreamlike quality to the game for me in some respects, and even there's the beautiful combination of the sort of sadness almost to it with a kind of coziness to it. And
Melancholy.
certainly, there,
Yeah.
melancholy is a great word for it. Yeah, I will say though, I do feel less of that than I felt with Hollow Knight. I've thought a little bit about why I feel that way, and one of the
Interesting.
things I think for me why I feel less cozy with Silksong, well, there's the obvious one, which is it's harder. So I feel more stressed playing Silksong because I'm doing things that are quite difficult and failing quite frequently. And also, on the other hand, Hollow Knight, both these games involve you being in a specific area, a specific sort of map, you know, and then you find a new area, a new map with probably a different theming and stuff like that. Hollow Knight, I feel like you spent quite a lot longer, especially in the first couple of areas before you move on to the next one. So I felt like, in fact, when I was playing Hollow Knight, I didn't know that there would be other areas. I thought the whole game would have more or less this aesthetic, and you just find more of it. So I felt like I had this sort of home base, this original first area of Hollow Knight. I feel like I know like the back of my hand because I spent so much time there at the start of that game, and then discovered like my blinders were taken off and the world expanded, and it was an incredible feeling. Silksong, that happened to a far lesser extent. Like you really rip through these territory or these maps as far as I can see. I mean, like, I'm probably getting through one an hour maybe.
I found that really confusing to start, where I feel like I've explored like 3 or 4 different environments and I haven't gotten through much of the game. I think I'm probably way less than a quarter of the way through the game, and I felt like I was speeding through different environments, but they didn't seem particularly cohesive to me. They seemed to sort of stop and start in a way that I didn't really understand. I haven't gotten to the stage of buying any maps yet because I kept losing my money. More on that later. But I found the environments really confusing. I felt like I was constantly stepping back and forth between like the grassy, mossy environment and like the bells environment and the sort of hellish environment, and then back to the mossy environment. I don't know. I felt quite confused, and maybe there's a sort of theory to it later. But I got quite confused, and I found it very difficult to organically navigate through the game because of that. That I was like, I don't remember if I was up, down, or left of this particular area before, because nothing seems very cohesive to me.
Yeah, I think your main problem is that you don't have the maps, and like because that's why I think that game goes way too long before you can even get a map, and then when you do get a map, it's just like not only does the maps cost money themselves, but also the ability to add new areas like that you find costs money, and then
Yeah.
the ability to have your position placed on the map costs money with the compass. And then the compass is also an equipable item that takes up a whole slot that you might use for something else. But practically everyone who plays the game has that compass in 100% of the time. So it just uses up
I
a
certainly
slot.
do.
Yeah. So it's just like literally quite early on in the game, you can't finally meet the person who will give you a map, and you just spend. I spent. I think a lot of people just spent like an hour or something grinding through this little area to make enough money to finally buy all this stuff you
quite
need,
different
so
from
you can
the
move
original
on,
Hollow Knight
which I don't
mechanically,
think
like
is
that
particularly good.
sort of buying maps and stuff.
No, you have to buy maps in Hollow Knight as well. Though I don't think it lets you go quite as long before you can buy the map.
I think it's partially what I was just alluding to, though, which is that I feel like it seems like there are going to be way more areas in Silksong, at least if they continue at the rate that I've experienced them so far.
Yeah.
And you spend so long in that first area that without a map, before I found the map for the first time in Silksong, I actually already kind of had a fairly good mental map of the first place. And then when you get to future places, they give you the map relatively early, was my experience. Like maybe after you'd been there for 20 or 30 minutes, maybe less than that, you'd find the guy with the map. You go to a new place, and finding the map and the first bench, those are like the two things that you're trying to do at the start. So there's like a momentum to it, and you don't have to do it so often. Yeah, whereas in this, it costs money, and you're not going to be in the area that long anyway. I've got areas that I've not bothered buying the map to because I already got through it before I found the guy with the map. Like the boss that I was just talking about, that whole area, I've not got the map for that. I went through that whole area without finding the map guy, or without having enough money to buy the map. So I've moved on with it. So I think Silksong, the mechanics are kind of the same, but because of how they're because of the game that they're a part of, it feels very different, I would say.
Yeah.
It feels more hostile in that sense.
I do kind of really hate playing without the map. I mean, I kind of respect it as oh man, when you first get in there, you got to like learn, got to get used to the area and got to learn it truly before you're allowed to get the map. So in that regard, it's okay. But just every time I go in, like certainly from the beginning of the game, I was like, okay, because I knew I played Hollow Knight, I knew how it works. I knew I'd have to buy a map at some point, but it takes so long, and I just can feel myself getting further and further away from the point where I can contain all the places I've seen in my head. Like, obviously, if there was no map in the game, I would get lost eventually, right? So the further I get, like, there is some limit where I'm like, well, I'm simply not going to remember anything past this point, and you get quite anxious. I mean, the game is actually quite well designed in that I think it kind of where the maps finally are like in like little in places that you maybe later on realize are kind of a bottleneck. So you're almost certainly going to actually come across it. But at the time, you're like, maybe this time it isn't. You go into a room, there's like 4 other doors off it. And I'm like, which one of these doors leads to where the map will be? I don't know. And so there's quite a lot of anxiety in that. And like as you go through the game, it's less of a problem. But at the beginning, it's way too long before before you can finally get a map. Yeah. Why don't we? I think we're all kind of dancing around it. Why don't we get into the difficulty discourse? There's other things to talk about this game. This isn't the only thing we'll be saying. But yeah, it's a very difficult game. It's certainly a good bit more difficult than the original Hollow Knight. You might want to try playing that, Sofie, if you're having trouble with this, because it is definitely easier. Like kind of, I think one of the most kind of emblematic things is that in the original Hollow Knight, you have a down slash when you're jumping, and you use this all the time. People call it pogoing because you can use it to basically jump on top of enemies or even spikes and stuff. Use it all the time. It's like one of your key things. And then in this game, you also have a down slash, but it's diagonal. And it's just like, oh, well, I personally think that's kind of bullshit because it's just like, it doesn't make it, it's not really more interesting. It's just harder. It's just more difficult to do, to kind of navigate how you're going to do that when it's diagonal. Later on in the game, you can get what are called crests, which I don't think maybe neither of you have even come across this. You get crests, which allow you, basically gives you a different way of organizing all your slots for putting things in, like the compass that I mentioned, but also it like changes your entire move set, and you get one that has a proper down slash, and I just like went to that and I never went back.
Oh my god, I can't wait. I can't wait for that. I love the original one from Hollow Knight. I found it so satisfying to use. I don't hate this one. Like I've been practicing it intentionally to try and get in the habit of it, but it mainly just means I don't use it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I think I have a kind of, I guess like a story to tell about the difficulty in this game, which I think kind of illustrates it. I think this game it's very difficult, and I don't think it's really, I mean, occasionally there's the odd bit here and there. I don't think it's really unfairly difficult. I don't think it's really bullshit ever. However, I think it's very mean, and I think that's the issue. It feels like a mean game. So
as Ed said, it feels hostile.
So my example is this. So at the end of the first act, this is well beyond where either of you have got to get into the Citadel, which is your initial first kind of objective. You have to fight a boss called the Last Judge. Now, if you go on the internet and hear about discourse, a lot of people talk about this boss. It's a very difficult boss. Now, the boss itself is very difficult. It's the hardest boss in the game I've faced by quite a long way. It's really, really hard. But I think the boss itself is fine. It's a very difficult boss, but it's difficult in all reasonable ways, right? But it's everything that kind of surrounds this boss that I think is the issue. So one, there's a quite long run back. So this is where the save point, the bench, the nearest one, is quite far away, and you have to sprint through. And there's like enemies and a whole bunch of difficult jumps over spikes and all this to get there. You can get quite good at it to the point where you can basically avoid every enemy. And there's like little kind of what we call shortcuts, but there's like clearly an optimal way through the whole thing that allows you to do that. But inevitably, the amount of times you are repeating this boss, which is many, you're going to mess up plenty of times. And that in itself is also, that's quite frustrating, especially for such a difficult boss, right? On top of that, when you finally beat the boss, this is, I guess, a small spoiler, but I think everyone should know this ahead of time, it explodes. And if you're caught in the explosion, it kills you. And the first time I
Does
did
it come back? Does it come back?
Well, yes, it does.
Oh my God. Well, thank you for telling me. Public service announcement.
The first time I beat it, the first time, it gives you a clue as to what happens. You know, it does the usual. Every time you beat one of these bosses, it does this like slow motion thing, and you can't really control the character. So I was like, okay, well, I can't move, so I should be safe. And then it starts to explode, but that kind of thing happens to a lot of bosses. They explode in some sort of magic, and then maybe Hornet absorbs the magic or something. Like, anyway, this kind of thing happens a lot. And then, so I don't try and run away because I don't even think I can move, and I die. And I'm back at the save point, and it literally took me hours to re-beat the boss. I did it over and over again. Finally, I beat it and ran away. So then I beat it, and then I'm finally able to get into the Citadel. First, it shows you a little cutscene of you seeing the Citadel for the first time. You go in, it's strangely deserted. There's not many places you can go. You walk into this lift and hit it, and then the lift breaks and crashes down into the basement, into this sewers, and you're stuck there, and you have to find your way back out into the Citadel. So after all that, you finally get to this place you've been trying to get to the whole game so far, and you're immediately kicked out and you can't actually explore it. You can, you get back there eventually, you work your way up, but just like, even then, it won't give it to you. Occasionally, a boss that you'll beat will actually give you something on a bit, like an item will drop out of it, but usually you get nothing. You don't get, they're not really bosses, but there are like these combat arenas where you just fight a bunch of enemies. Usually enemies drop these like shards, or more valuably, these rosaries, which are your main currency in the game. Even when you're fighting in these arenas and you're fighting normal enemies that you'll fight out in the world, they don't drop anything, even though they drop things in the outer world. So there's just kind of miserliness to the game. It just doesn't want to give you anything. And like, this leads to my kind of final point about this last judge boss, which is, it was very difficult. I did it over and over and over and over again for like multiple play sessions where I played it. And sometimes I thought, well, maybe I should just leave and go and do something else in the world, explore a new area. But I kind of realized there's not really much point in that. I mean, it would be fun to explore a new area, but I'm not realistically going to get any stronger from doing that, right? Because over the course of so I think by the time I beat this boss, I played 16 hours. Over that time, from the beginning of the game to there, I had found 4 mask pieces, and you need 4 to get 1 extra mask. And you start off with 5 masks of health, and that 1 extra mask means I'm up to 6. So after the entire game I played up to this point, and I explore a lot, I'm quite thorough. I'm sure there's things I've missed, but there's no like low-hanging fruit left. There's nothing obvious. That I'm pretty sure I've got everything that's clearly there. I was able to extend my health by 1 point. So I could go off and explore, but what am I really going to find? I am not going to find 4 more of those things. So I'm not going to be able to extend my health by any more. Everything else you can get to actually like improve yourself is like very marginal. You might get a tiny extension to your silk gauge, which is your kind of gauge for healing and also doing some special attacks. It's just like, it feels very miserly. Now, I played lots of these Metroidvania games, and usually you go through it and you're constantly finding little pickups that give you, oh, you got more missiles, you got more health. These, they're there, but they're like fractions of them. So you get so much less. And even in a game like, say, Elden Ring, which works quite similarly. So, I mean, in general, the kind of one of the big reasons why Hollow Knight was popular in the first place, because it wasn't the first game to do this, but the first one to really kick off with it was because it's kind of a melding of the Metroidvania, the 2D Metroidvania, and the Dark Souls like game, and that's a combination of it. So Elden Ring, for instance, is a game. Obviously, it's a Dark Souls like, it's a Souls like game, but because it's got this big open world, when you fight a boss and you can't beat the boss, and it's like the first big bosses, you can go off and you can in a similar way to what I was suggesting you might want to do in Silksong, you can go off and do other stuff. But in that case, you're going to come back and you will be strong. You'll have probably found more gear. More importantly, you will have leveled up probably a number of times since then. So you have more health, more strength, all that. There is no level up system in there. So it feels very kind of ungenerous to the point where, like, I didn't feel like there was much point in going to explore because I'm just going to be back here in pretty much exactly the same circumstance. But now I've like lost some muscle memory. Yeah, sorry, that was my kind of long theory about the difficulty, which is that the core of it, the actual combat is fine.
Yeah,
The actual bits that are like properly difficult, those are fine. If a bit, I think they probably could be tuned down a little bit, but they're largely fine. But it's just everything around it just feels so ungenerous. It feels like the game is really working against you in a kind of mean way.
I guess I want to talk a little bit about
Go
my
for it,
experience with the difficulty, because then we're going to go to Ed, who is obviously more familiar, so we could sandwich it in this way. Obviously, yeah, I haven't played the original Hollow Knight, and I kind of knew getting the game. Obviously, you know, we decided we'd play this game because we had a chat last week and found out you two were playing it, and I was like, I'll play it as well. We might as well all talk about it. I knew I probably wasn't going to enjoy it because I don't really love platformers. I don't really love games that are difficult. That the game is that it is difficult. I'm not a huge fan because I'm not a real gamer. I am a woman after all, so I can't be both. It's
That's not the official position of the Red Hour podcast, to be clear to our listeners. Well, until we make our anti-woke turn for the money later on.
You know why I left the left. Yeah, I think so I kind of knew that I wasn't going to enjoy it, but I got it on the Switch anyway because I thought, you know, if I'm going to play a platformer, it might as well be on the Switch. But yeah, I did find that I was sort of rage quitting a lot, and genuinely was, I think, the problem that you mentioned of like, what else do I do? What else do I do if I don't constantly grind? I had the problem of I just never had any money. I just never had any money. So I found it really difficult to progress. And obviously I'm not very good at these sorts of games. So like I 100% acknowledge that there is legitimately a skill issue here. I'm not good at these games, and I don't think I'm the target audience. I don't enjoy these types of games. I don't enjoy grinding. I don't enjoy losing over and over and over again, only to win occasionally, it feels like, by pure luck. But yeah, I found the sort of punishing nature of exploration really frustrating. I do find it very frustrating in games like, I've always said this, that like, I feel like Minecraft, ironically, really discourages exploration because the stakes of dying and like losing all your stuff are so high that like whenever I used to play Minecraft, I was terrified of exploring because I was so scared of losing all my stuff. But I played it way back in the day when there was no map. So it was like, if I lose all my stuff and then I can't find my body, the stakes are so high. And I kind of felt a similar frustration with this game where I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to find my body, but also I'm so likely to lose like the 10 rosaries that I have. I have so few and I just keep losing them. And it feels like I keep losing them to A, not knowing where my body was, and B, trying to do something else. But then I'm like, I constantly had the frustrating choice of like, I can go find my body and do that really frustrating fight again, and then possibly just keep dying there, which happened to me a lot. Or I can go do something else and just accept the loss of the coin, of the money anyway, or the things that I had anyway, and just go and explore something else, and then just die somewhere else. It was kind of the pattern that I was in. And to be honest, I actually only discovered the sort of directional nature of the attacks like an hour or two into the game. I had no idea that you could do a diagonal attack. I didn't know that you could attack upwards either. I thought I could only attack to the left or the right. So like a lot of the game, I was just like foolishly waiting for things to cross to my like into my path just so that I could attack it. I found like the flying enemies really challenging. And I was like, God, this must take forever because I keep having to wait for an enemy to get into a very specific spot for me to attack. So I was very embarrassed when I found out that actually there are directional attacks. And then obviously I was kind of baffled by the diagonal one. I was like, oh man, that's so hard to hit on like a switch, on like the little analog, the little, I don't know what
Yeah.
you guys call it, a joystick, analog
One.
stick? I was like, that's so hard to hit on that. For me, I don't know, getting it like exactly
Yeah.
diagonal, it was very particular, and I just found that really difficult to hit. Also, I guess I looked this up. Why is it? Because enemies do 2 points of damage,
Yeah.
but they give you like 5 heads. But enemies do 2 points of damage except for the last one, and I found that really confusing when I started. I was like, is it just some enemies that do 2? Is it everyone that
No,
does 2? Does some do 1? And I found it really confusing. Like, why give me 5 heads if almost everything seems to do 2 damage? Like, why not then just give me 3 heads? I don't understand, because if it's only 3 hits.
Most of the normal
Yeah.
enemies do 1
But there's like
damage,
contact
but,
damage as well,
like
right?
a lot of the bosses and big boys do too.
Yeah, like some of them had like higher contact damage than if they like actually attacked you. Like some of them, if you just happened to touch them by accident, I think the damage was different depending on contact versus attack damage. That was so baffling for me as like someone who was new to the series. But again, I'm very aware that this game wasn't intended for me. It did feel very much like it was a love letter to fans who liked the first game. Felt very much like a continuation, not only a sequel, but like, okay, you finished Hollow Knight, so let's go directly into this one. Let's do like a double or
Yeah.
nothing challenge mode. That's kind of what it feels like. And
That
for
was-
me, I found a
That was
lot of
what
that
I was
just really
thinking of playing
confusing.
it as well. In 1985, Nintendo released a game, you may have heard of it, called Super Mario Bros. In 1986, they released a sequel to that game, which was only playable in Japan, which was
No, I've
framed
not heard of
as
that.
Super Mario Bros. For super players. And
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
Silksong feels like. It feels like you're meant to finish Hollow Knight and then immediately move on to this game because the difficulty, the end of this game, at the start of this game, is quite similar to
Yeah.
at the end of Hollow Knight.
Yeah.
So it's like Super Mario. Yeah, it's Hollow Knight for super players, and it's I can see why you would bounce off,
Yeah.
especially given
Yeah,
your
that's
general
the thing. So it was a little.
you not being the sort of person that likes this genre that much. But I do think you would almost certainly have more fun with Hollow Knight.
It was a little frustrating
yeah.
there
You
of just
specifically,
like this
Sofie.
feeling of like trying to understand inside jokes of that everyone else is making, and I'm just like, I don't really understand. I feel like I'm missing everything. I don't really, just the fact that there are no instructions, there are no directions, which
Yeah.
I know a lot of games kind of have now as a sort of minimalist aesthetic, but some, again, it did feel very much like for the fans, which is not something I can critique, but it was additionally frustrating for me in that way. But I do also can acknowledge that it's like, yeah, it wasn't for me, but it was very obvious that it wasn't for me. And I think that kind of agitated me a little bit. I wouldn't have minded like that to be slightly more thinly veiled, but it really felt like an in-group that I wasn't really invited to. But I'm not taking that super personally, but that's just kind of how the game design felt. I felt unwelcome in the environment that it was as a new player, as someone who hadn't experienced Hollow Knight. I felt quite unwelcome.
I was going to say, in terms of the sort of lack of direction and stuff, I feel like that is also true of the start of Hollow Knight. So I think that part of it is more a continuation of the vibe of Hollow Knight. It's not like if you had played Hollow Knight, then that would have helped you with Silksong, other than you like manage your expectations of what the game's going to be like better, I suppose. So what were you going to say, Alex?
I was just going to say that I would recommend, Sofie, that you go back to that place where you can buy the map. And I think I mentioned to you before we start recording, there's a place where you can just go in a little circuit and grind for the money. It doesn't really take that long to make enough to buy all the map stuff. It's pretty ridiculous that you have to do all that, but I would recommend doing that because once you have the map and like I think a lot of the anxiety will just kind of will be dealt with because like, okay, now you know the vague scope of the world. You know where your little cocoon is, where you died. So if you want to go back to, you can find it quite easily. I think if you give that a go and then try playing it again,
that makes
you'll
sense,
have a much better time. Also, I would very much recommend that you use the D-pad instead of the analogs. It'll make the game much easier.
Yeah. Which, like, yeah, I mean, yeah, part of this frustration could just be it was one of the first games that I've also played, like, from scratch on the Switch that I haven't have some experience playing on PC. But again, I want to make it very clear to listeners as well that, like, I also 100% appreciate that, like, I didn't really play long enough to criticize the game on its sort of core things. Everything I've felt is really just sort of feelings as a new player. But I also could tell very much that this game wasn't for me. That just because I was struggling didn't mean that it was bad, but it also was quite vindicating to see fans of the series also complaining about how difficult it was. That was quite vindicating for me because at first I was, is it just me? Am I just uniquely bad at video games? So that's the thing. I'm kind of like able to appreciate, like, yes, I didn't enjoy it, but I also kind of knew that, and that's a me problem, that it could be a really good game, but this kind of genre just I really bounce off of it. So, but I did, like I said, feel very vindicated by the entire discourse of everyone saying, is it too difficult? And it's like, kind of like you, I would even say, no, I don't think it's too difficult. Like, despite the experience I had, I don't think it's too difficult. The time where I did struggle with bosses and then I did beat them, it was very satisfying. And I didn't actually, all the bosses that I fought, they didn't actually take that many attempts for me. I sort of like, once I could memorize the pattern, even operating on the limited understanding of I could only attack left or right, I still managed to beat them.
Well, that
And
genuinely
it felt
quite impressive.
satisfying when it did. Yeah, then it genuinely felt quite satisfying when it did. So yeah, even I wouldn't describe it as too difficult. But just kind of baffling, and as you say, just kind of stingy at some points. Like, I really do think the 2 versus 1 head health thing was just maybe a bit of a strange choice. I'm not sure. As you said, that feels just very like Super Mario's,
Yeah.
challenge mode.
Yeah, I mean, my take on the difficulty, I think some of the ways in which it's hard is the issue, rather than it being like too hard. And for an example of that, like you've just said, Sophie, the boss patterns, I've not found the bosses to be difficult per se. I find the boss patterns are relatively well signposted. You can learn the boss patterns relatively soon. The difficulty for me with the bosses is just how many goddamn hits these guys take.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the first encounter with Lace. I was counting how many hits it took for me to beat Lace with like relatively straightforward patterns. It was like more than 40 hits. It was like 40 hits, which is just remarkably
wow.
just
Yeah,
so
yeah.
long. And like, because you take so much damage whenever you make a mistake.
Yeah, it's like 40 to 3.
Yeah, exactly. It means I'm redoing the 40 hit fight so many times. I mean, again, in reality, I have got through the fights sort of quicker than it feels like retrospectively. Like, I haven't been stuck on a boss for more than like an hour so far. I am relatively early, but I find that a frustrating a frustrating aspect of the difficulty, because it's like, you not only have to sort of master the boss's moves, you've got to master the boss's moves and then continue to do it for a really long time, and then you get through it. And I find that not a very fun way of it being hard. I would rather that they took fewer hits to kill, but like were more complicated to learn their patterns, or it was like more difficult to actually hit them. Like,
Yeah.
that would be a more satisfying thing for me.
That's true, yeah.
On that point, this is
Yeah.
just maybe this is just me. Maybe this would ruin the vibe. I would kind of like a boss health bar, because
Yeah.
I'm like, these bosses,
I
some
would.
of them, like I'm saying, like 40, 50, 60 hits, some of them, like really long fights, and I've just got no idea how
Yeah.
close I am to the end. That one, what was it called again? Moss.
One of them I just got kind of
Yeah,
bored.
what was the one that I said? Was it called Moss Wing? Is that the one that I just beat? I'm not sure if you remember, Alex. Moss Wing, is that the name of the boss? Moorwing.
Yeah.
Moorwing's the name
It's
of the
that one,
boss.
yeah. Moorwing. Yeah.
So I found Moorwing really frustrating, not because it was hard, but because I was expecting it to have even more health than it actually ended up having. So as it turned out, I was very close to beating Moorwing for like quite a few times, but I'd really convinced myself that it was going to have maybe like maybe I wasn't even halfway yet in terms of the health. Like, I've got no idea how much health this guy has, and the other ones have all had so much health that it feels like I'm making no progress. I feel like I'm just always a million miles away from actually beating this guy, even though I've
Yeah.
got the patterns down well, like relatively well. So then I eventually beat him, and I was like, oh, okay, it actually really wasn't that hard. But like, it also was like, it was like hard for me to keep going because I was like stressed out about it, and like, I don't know. Yeah, I felt stressed that I was constantly dying and felt like I was hitting my head against a brick wall and making no progress. But then it turned out actually I was not that far from beating it, and then I did beat it. Like, so it created a weird vibe, a weird thing for me, where it's like not so hard that I felt super great that I'd beaten it, but also it actually was very stressful and hard because I had no idea how far away I was from beating it until I beat it. So for me, that's where the difficulty is an issue. I agree with all the other things that you guys have both said, really. I guess the only other thing that I would add is because of the difficulty, it means I'm using my silk to heal almost all of the time.
Yeah.
Which means I'm not engaging with any of the other weapons in the game, really.
Using it for
I'm just saving
abilities.
it up so that I can heal from my inevitable hits, which I remember I reviewed the Force Unleashed video game on previous
I was wondering when
episode of
someone would
this.
compare these two games because they're definitely like two of a piece, right? And they're in conversation with each other. I was just thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also compared God of War. In God of War, I said that the mechanics were such that it was like you needed to engage with the mechanics in order to get through the game. And then I said the Force Unleashed was so easy that you didn't really need to engage with the mechanics to get through the game. I'd say this is like the other side of it. This is like the game is so hard that it's also stopping me from engaging properly with the mechanics because I feel like I'm too stressed to actually experiment with the mechanics at all.
Yeah.
And same with the sort of lack of willingness to explore and stuff like that. Like, I feel kind of restricted in what I feel like it's acceptable for me to do because it's so difficult and because there's no point in it.
Yeah.
I do think the game is too difficult, I guess, but not because I think it needs to be easier, but rather because I think it could be difficult in a different way, and I would find that a more satisfying experience. That's kind of where I'm at with it so far. I haven't got to this boss that Alex is describing, and now I'm quite scared. But I
Now
guess
you know it
that's
explodes.
well, yeah. Thank you. I'll run away.
Yeah.
But that's kind of my take on the difficulty discourse. I guess maybe there are people that are really enjoying the difficulty being in this specific way, in which case more power to them. But it's not how I would prefer to experience a difficult game, and that's why I brought in the Dark Souls comparison. The Dark Souls comparison, it's got the boss health bar, so I always know, even if this guy's destroying me a lot, I do know that I can gradually see how close I am to beating this boss eventually. Each run, I know that I'm 80% of the way there now, 90% of the way there, and then I've done it, Whereas this one, it's like I could at any point be 20% of the way done with the boss or 90% of the way done with the boss. I don't know.
I think, especially, I think as you go on in the game, you begin to recognize that a lot of them have like multiple stages and stuff like that. Like that last judge boss, like it's got a number, like it's got like 3 distinct stages to it, and in between that, like when you hit it a certain number of times, it like falls over and has like a dizzy animation, and you can hit it a bunch of times, and like it's got like a set number of those. So there is a way to like gauge how far away along you are. But yeah, I mean, I don't see why there wouldn't be a bar.
There's a way of gauging how far from the start you are, but there's not a way of gauging how close to the end.
Yeah, like you don't know how many stages there are going to be.
Exactly. I mean, I think that
That's
Lace boss that I mentioned has maybe 4 or 5 times where she goes down before you end up actually beating her, which is just like, I'm a rule of 3 kind of boy. When I got her down that 3rd time, I was like, I did it. And then she got back up again, and then again. And it's just like, it was just a very frustrating experience because it was like I thought I'd done it, and then I hadn't, and now I've got no idea, and it was just sort of discouraging. I'm like, well, is this just going to go on forever? Like, does she ever die?
I was just going to say, it feels like there was just some difficulty surrounding sort of like subverting what we might expect as sort of regular gamers with a regular amount of video game literacy. Of just like, this is not the amount of downtimes I expect. This is, without a health bar, I expect other kinds of indications to show me how far a boss is away from dead. So I feel like a lot of it was just sort of, in terms of like, there's a universal language that we all understand as people who've played video games for a really long time. And, red barrels explode, go towards light areas. They generally have the next plot. If you're fighting enemies, you're probably in the right place, you're in the right direction kind of thing. And I feel like there's a lot of subverting of that sort of typical game literacy that I would expect. Like the heads, hits not necessarily being representative of how much damage I'm taking. And then it's also not an indication of how much damage I need to do to a boss. The sort of holding back of maps, which a lot of, us have come to rely on in terms of, again, gaming literacy. So like, it felt like a lot of, maybe it's an experiment that some people feel like went right. I think for me, it's like, I agree that it was just kind of difficult in a way.
I think your perspective, Sophie, is like really important on this because I think this game has become so kind of hyped and such a big deal that I'm sure that a significant number of people are playing this game who never played Hollow Knight, and don't even play these kind of games that because it just got such a huge amount of kind of FOMO around it. I mean, that's
And the buzz accompanied with the fact that this game remains bargain. Like it's
yeah.
really, they could easily have doubled the price of this game, and they would probably have straightforwardly doubled the money.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
Yeah.
Yeah,
Me too.
it's kind of weird. In fact, I believe there's been like
I was really pleasantly surprised by how cheap it was.
some indie game makers who are like quite angry about it because they've like set unrealistic expectations for their games, because basically they could put this, make it, they can make, well, they could make it this cheap
Baldur's Gate
because it's made by literally 3 people pretty much, for including the composer, which is a small number even by indie game standards. And they knew it was going to sell tens of millions of copies. But like, there's a lot of indie games that, you know, they simply could not put their game at this price because they would be destitute. They're not getting rich with their games. They're just about getting by. And if they did it quite as cheap as this, it would be a problem. But at the same time, I'm not going to complain that it's this cheap. And it is refreshing to see when so many games are so expensive these days. Yeah.
and also it's not like they've occupied this position of sort of privilege in the indie game sector of they know they're going to sell tons, and that's why they priced it so cheaply.
Yeah.
Hollow Knight was also the same price. Like, it was also very cheap. So
Yeah, but that was also like quite a long time. That was almost 10 years ago.
sure, but it was still cheap for the time.
Yeah.
Like, given how big that game was.
Well, it wasn't. Thing is, Hollow Knight was not a big success early on. It came out, no one had heard of it. It had like a Kickstarter that like passed its amount by some, but not a huge amount. And it was kind of unknown. I think most like websites didn't review it when it came out because it was like one of a million games, and its popularity kind of increased over time as people played it. So I don't know. I'm just saying there's quite a legitimate kind of reason to be annoyed at them for indie game developers. But as I say, I'm not going to complain about it. But I will say, I think I may have been a bit too hard on this game in the difficulty. I stand by everything I just said about it, but I am really enjoying it. I think it is a very good game. Every day I'm like, oh man, I want to get back and play some more. I just literally, I had my preparation for this podcast done earlier than I thought. So I was like, I can get in like half an hour and play a bit more Silksong just before I came on. Found myself a grappling hook. There's a grappling hook in this game. I got it.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Is there a dodge?
Pardon?
Do you get a dodge?
Yes, you do get a dodge. Yes.
God, that must be nice.
It's quite early on. You don't have to play much further to find it. And I will say that the thing that's really, I think, impressive about this game is the movement, and that really unlocks when you get that dodge, because the dodge also, you dodge and you hold it and it turns into a sprint, and you go extremely fast. And then when you jump, when you're sprinting, you do this like kind of beautiful pirouetting jump that goes really far. And that, including like all the the pogoing on things, and eventually there's a wall jump you get. It really feels kind of acrobatic when you play the game. This is quite different from the original Hollow Knight, where he's just like a little guy who just kind of moves relatively slowly. And you get a lot of abilities and powers over the course of the game, but he's just like a little guy who just stabs, basically, at the start.
I'm not sure I agree with that difference between Silksong and Hollow Knight. I feel like part of the appeal of Hollow Knight for me, part of the joy of it, was how fun it was to move later on in the game. So I'm excited for Silksong to repeat that.
Well, I mean,
and we've already had some stuff that wasn't in Hollow Knight where I'm at.
I mean, this is like, this feels like acrobatic and graceful from very early on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that is, as I say, I just found a grappling hook. So even relative, I mean, I don't really know how far I'd say I'm probably midway through Act 2, and I don't know how many acts there are. I feel like there's got to be at least an Act 3, right? Can't just have 2 acts. That would be weird. Maybe there's 5 acts. Maybe there's 10 acts. I have no idea. So I don't know how far I really am, but I'm still unlocking abilities. And when there are like areas where you really just can, for instance, that run back to the last judge I mentioned, I had that down to like an art where I was like perfectly jumping off of things and pirouetting through the sky and like dinging off these enemies and stuff. It was really good. And that's, I think, as I said, you kind of get that stuff towards the end of Hollow Knight, but this is like from very early on. It's feeling really good to just move around. And I don't think I've ever played a game, a Metroidvania game like that has this kind of quality of movement in it. It's kind of incredible. So I do really love that.
Yeah, I think I could kind of tell I was really excited to get like a dodge ability because I felt like I could feel like it was one of those games where the movement is really going to be one of the mechanics that really open up the game for you. I could identify that quite early on, but obviously it was frustrating how far away it seemed for me. But yeah, it makes me think of like
I think actually the point you mentioned where you got to, you are like just before you get the dodge.
just before it, and I
Yeah.
think that is the thing is I keep bouncing off of it, and I do find it frustrating. But like, yeah, it does remind people will think this is an unapt comparison, but like Kingdom Hearts had this joy for me when I was a kid, where like you move so stupidly when you first start the game, and it's just challenging just because you don't have that much movement. But then you learn a dodge and you learn air attacks and stuff, and like being able to upgrade the movement, like the early Spider-Man games on the PlayStation 2 as well also did that really well. Potentially later Spider-Man games as well, where just the more and more you unlock like flips and spins and sort of different ways of like, lining up your sort of flights together in Spider-Man or whatever. I love games that use additional movement options as a way to like really incentivize and change the gameplay for you. It keeps it really fresh. I just regret that it seems like I've just sort of bounced off of it. So just before getting any of those movement options, but so I'm not, and again, that's one of me, or I'm like, that's on me where I'm like, I don't think it's too late. I don't think it's too soon or whatever. I'm just like, oh, I could identify it really early on, and that was something I was supposed to get eventually. And was excited to get it, but also was just like, God damn, this game is so frustrating right now.
I don't think that's on you. I think that's a genuine problem with the game. Early on, a combination of the general difficulty and the simplicity of the abilities you have just leads and the map thing. It leads to a very hostile invitation to certainly newcomers and even me. I've played and finished Hollow Knight. And I found it quite hostile until you finally get feels like you get your kind of feet under the table. Okay, right. Okay, I've got the map. I've got these abilities, and now I kind of feel like I'm I've mastered the game to a certain degree, and I'm not like constantly just like at a loss of what I can do. And so I think if you stick with it a bit longer, you will enjoy it more. But it's definitely a big problem with the game that's an issue anyway. They could have had an easier on ramp and like still have had a similar level of general difficulty in the game. I think.
Is there politics or something that we want to talk
Yeah, politics. It's hard to say. I've the story in this and kind of it's similar to Dark Souls and that it's very bare bones, but there's like subtle lore and stuff around it. But like really, you have to have explored. I mean, I think probably you will most likely not have any idea what happened in this game until you watch a lore video after you finished it, which is what usually happens with me. But it's clearly there is clearly a level of criticism of religion in this game. The whole thing is like at the beginning of the game, you're kidnapped by these people you don't know who they are, and then you're basically your target is to just find them and I guess deal with them in some way. It's not even entirely clear what you're trying to do to them. Are you going to kill them? Or are you going to just talk to them? Whatever. But they're up in this place, the Citadel, you find out. So that's where you're going. And that's where I finally got to when I beat that boss. And there, as you make your way to the Citadel, you encounter a whole bunch of these pilgrims who are making a pilgrimage to the Citadel. And they, like the main currency that we've been talking about is rosaries. They have these rosary beads. And the pretty clear implication is that the religion is bad and a lie. Most of the pilgrims have turned into zombies and just your enemies, and that's where you get the rosaries from. So, I mean, I think there's a pretty straightforward criticism of religion in the game. I mean,
and rosaries specifically are obviously used in Catholicism. So I wonder if it's specifically targeted at that religion. I couldn't say at that point.
I wouldn't. I mean, it's kind of maybe aesthetically a bit like it, but I haven't seen much in the way of
effect when enemies drop rosaries.
Oh, the sound
That was
effects in
really
this
nice.
game and like the little bits of voice and
just-
stuff are amazing.
Just the bead sounds, like
I just wish I could hear
So
that sound
lovely.
effect more.
Yeah.
same. I just wanted it more, both because it was a nice sound effect and also where the fuck is it?
Eventually, you can. I think from that first vendor, you can buy a. I think you can slot into a slottable thing. I can't remember what they're called, artifacts or something. I don't know. That magnetizes all the rosaries to you, so you whenever they,
That's nice.
it's got to be taken up by the fucking compass, which you need at all times. Eventually, you can open up more slots, and so you put it in. But yeah, there is a way to do that a bit better. But yeah, the sound effects and the music in general as well. But sound effects are I mean, that's like 60% of the vibes are just the sound effects, which are phenomenal. Kind of weird to talk about sound effects that glowingly in a game, but they are amazing.
Oh, sound design.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it is just phenomenal.
Same.
yeah.
And I mean, it's got a lot of the strengths that Hollow Knight has got, and I feel like overall the things we've been saying seem like quite negative. But at least I think probably I could speak for me and Alex at least in saying I feel like I do like the game.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm going to keep playing it. I'm going to finish it, and that it may be that in retrospect I think even more highly of the game. But I think the differences between this game and Hollow Knight make it harder in ways that are not necessarily all that appealing to me. And Alex, you've also identified, you're later in the game than me, but that the movement feels like it's possibly an improvement over Hollow Knight. So it sounds more negative because we're comparing it negatively in a way to a really, really great game. But that's not to say that I don't like it. Like I
which
like
is the
it.
other thing
I
about
just-
a game like this, right? Is that it's got such big shoes to fill, especially when we've got such a long lead time between two different games. That's always going to make a game suffer in terms of the eventual sort of reception when it releases. Like, it had such a cult following and then also such a long lead time. And then, we've seen this before with any sort of fan favorites, that if you give people enough time to speculate, online about what's going to be in it, then inevitably everyone's going to be disappointed because it just can't possibly live up to the level of hype. I know that it's done slightly worse than Hollow Knight. Like, I guess it had like a 9 on Metacritic and maybe an 8.7 or something on Metacritic is Silksong sitting at the moment, something like that. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But it is hard. So I do kind of sympathize when it comes to games like this where there's so much, I don't know, it makes me think of like unreleased games like Half-Life 3 or Portal 3, where it's like, yeah, there's just so much expectation. I kind of would understand why nobody would ever bother developing it, because it's like, yeah, you can't possibly live up to the expectations of the because now the wait time has been too long and it has to be a perfect game at this stage, so that sort of sucks as well, I think, for it, which I think then, my perspective as a completely new player is interesting in and of itself. I think I am more motivated to play Hollow Knight now, and I was interested in it for a while. Like, a lot of it's popular on Twitch. A lot of people just make their entire careers. It's one of those that we call them category surfers on Twitch, is people who just watch one specific category, and like Hollow Knight is one of those games that has loads of category surfers. That it's just people who watch people play Hollow Knight. So and it's like I'd like to give that a try. I think if anything I've taken from Silksong is like, yeah, I think sounds like Hollow Knight. Sounds like I could maybe give that a try and bounce off of it a bit less.
I will warn you that Hollow Knight is not like an easy game. that game is also still pretty difficult.
Oh, no, I know. I know it's still the Metroidvania game. I know that. But I do feel like Silksong has a certain level of like barrier to entry, which is just I haven't been here that long. I feel like I just don't have enough loyalty card stamps to really play it and get it and enjoy it.
I would certainly recommend playing Hollow Knight before playing Silksong just for the difficulty, really.
Yeah.
It's not like the story is tied together or something, as far as I can see.
As a warm-up.
Yeah, as a warm-up,
almost complete. I think there are I'm no lore expert. Maybe there's more connections than it seems, but it's pretty thin connection. It's like the character of Hornet you play is in the original Silksong, and they kind of occasionally
Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight, they occasionally she occasionally refers to what happened in that game very obliquely. But that's pretty much it. There's not really huge connections. So yeah, you probably should play Hollow Knight, but you don't have to like, so finally the lore makes sense.
Should we?
Yeah, I think that's probably the
Good discussion.
I'm trying to think about a pun like Silkstravaganza, that like the Silksclusion, the
The swan
Silksclusion,
song?
the
The
silk
Surely
silk
song
swan-
clusion
the
would
silk
have been
song?
better.
It's already
That's what it is. The swan song? The
it
swan
doesn't
silk?
matter. It's already the silk song. It
The
doesn't matter.
swan silk song.
But anyway, it's the end. It's the end. It's the end in the silk song way. All right. So I think
Song conclusion.
we're going to have to move on to the news, and we do have some juicy stuff. So yeah, it's going to be now the news. The news is happening. It's news time. We've got three subjects. One pretty heavy,
Ta-da.
one pretty light, and mine. I mean, I don't know what to say is in the middle, considering how heavy the heavy one is, but it's more heavy than the light one. Let's just say that. This will make sense to our listeners, maybe in hindsight when we're done. But anyway, we're going to go for it. I'm up first with a bit of a roundup of the Nintendo Direct. They announced in quite short order and then had a Nintendo Direct, which is their thing they put on YouTube, which is just them announcing a bunch of games and other announcements. But this one was quite surprising because it was a full hour long, which is, I think, perhaps the longest they've ever done these. And I will go through the highlights. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but they opened with, speaking of Mario Brothers 2 that we were saying before, or the Lost Levels, sorry, as it's called in the West. It's the 40th anniversary of Super Mario Brothers.
Wahoo!
From, I think, right now. I think the game came out in Japan like a few days ago, 40 years ago. So they're making a bit of a big deal about this. They also made a bit of a big deal about the 35th anniversary, which led to people on the internet being like, "Oh, but they must be doing something big. It's the 35th anniversary. Couldn't possibly forget the 35th anniversary, right?" The 40th anniversary is not that much more exciting. The main thing they announced or showed was the new Mario movie trailer, which I don't particularly care about. I saw that first movie. It was all right, I guess. Frankly, if I didn't love Mario, I don't think
Right.
I'd
I
have
thought there
watched
was
it.
another one.
No, the cartoon one. That was a few years ago. The live action one with not Danny DeVito, it's Bob Hoskins back in the 90s. Now it's a masterpiece. No one can deny that. No. This is a new movie. It's going to be the Super Mario Galaxy movie. It's going to be based on Mario Galaxy. I guess they're going to go to space. That's fun. They actually had some music in the trailer from, well, firstly, there were rumors it was going to be called Super Mario World, and I suspect those were planted rumors because it opened with Super Mario World, the game music, and then the twist was, no, it's Mario Galaxy. But the mere fact that it had music from the games is interesting.
What a twist.
I know. Because the big problem with that last movie was that it was full of these like needle drops where they would just drop in an 80s pop song and it felt completely incongruent. This suggests maybe it's going to just have music from the games in it, which would be nice. Anyway, because they're doing that, they're going to obviously have something to kind of coincide with this. And what they're going to do is they're re-releasing the two Super Mario Galaxy games that were originally on Wii on the Switch and Switch 2, the combo of Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. The only reason I want to talk about this really is because they announced weirdly in the show there is very little updates to these games. There's no like new levels or anything. Not even there's like very slight visual upgrades. It's like it's in 4K or whatever. But they did announce that in Mario Galaxy there is a storybook you can read. There's like you go in a little room, there's a little storybook, and it's quite a touching little story. It's like obviously ripping off the Little Prince, but it's genuinely quite nice and touching. And then that's not in Mario Galaxy 2. There's nothing like that. And they have just announced that there's going to be new pages, and also there's going to be another storybook in Mario Galaxy 2, which is a weird thing to put in these games. Now, the backstory in this is that Shigeru Miyamoto, who the creator of Mario, who directed all the original Mario games, by this point, he'd progressed to the point where he's like an exec director. He's like running the whole teams that do this. And the director was instead this guy called Yoshiaki Koizumi. And he loves story. He did the story for Link's Awakening, for instance. And Shigeru Miyamoto famously hates story in games. He always wants to cut out the story or as bare bones as possible. And so apparently he kind of snuck that storybook in. And then Miyamoto got pissed off and said, you can't have that in Mario Galaxy 2. So he was cut out. But now, Miyamoto is kind of sort of just retired. He's working on that movie. He's working on the theme parks. He's about 70 now. So he's like just whatever. He's just doing, kind of pops in every so often, gives some advice, and probably spends time with his grandchildren, whatever, mainly. But Koizumi now has Miyamoto's job that he used to have. And he's just like, this is like a power play, right? He's just like, oh yeah, motherfucker, I'm putting those storybooks in. You can't stop me now, old man. I'm in charge. So this is like internal politics at Nintendo. It's like, court mysteries. It's all that stuff, right? Other Mario
sort of
games,
spicy tale.
other Mario games are coming out. New tennis game. Mario Wonder's getting an update. There's a Yoshi game, which isn't really the same series as Mario anymore. It has a very nice graphical style. It kind of harks back to the original Mario Yoshi's Island, but also looks like it's going to be very gentle. Like a lot of these games are basically introductory children's platformers, which is a bit disappointing. They showed off Metroid Prime 4 again. It's got a release date. It's coming out in the beginning of December. People were worried about that. There was a thing we didn't mention on the podcast over the summer when the Switch 2 came out on the London Underground. I think specifically in Tottenham Court Road Station, they like took over like the advertising hoardings on the platform for an entire platform, I guess. And one of them said, Metroid Prime 4 out now. And people were quite surprised about that because that game, it turns out, is not coming out till December. So people wondered if there was some sort of like secret. It maybe really is out now. Maybe it's a secret. Maybe it isn't. No, it seems like someone just fucked up. But they showed off Metroid Prime 4 again. I would say there's no further evidence of my gynecological theories about that game. But she does have a motorbike now, and it seems like there's an open world alongside it, which is pretty cool and interesting. Not something Metroid's done before. That's fun. Donkey Kong Bonanza got some DLC, which is weird because that game just came out and people are kind of surprised they're doing that early, but there we go. A new weird Pokemon game where you play as a Ditto, which is the Pokemon that can kind of transform into other things. It's just a blob. And it decides to turn into a weird version of a little girl. And then it goes out into the world and it's basically like a Minecraft world. And it looks like a mix between kind of Minecraft and Animal Crossing, where you have to build things to make Pokemon appear and then do things to the Pokemon. But this weird little girl is very weird and disturbing, and it's an odd angle to go for Pokemon. Gotta say,
what's this game called?
It's called Pokopia, which is, I guess, like Utopia but
Sorry.
Pokemon.
That's stupid.
That's very true. There's
what's it called in Japanese?
I think it's probably called Pokopia as well, I imagine.
Utopia is a...
Yeah, probably.
But like, obviously Utopia is a...
I think Japanese...
That pun only works in the English language.
I mean, it's barely
unless they have the same word for Utopia in
It's barely a
Japanese.
pun. And I think...
Oh, it's a pun. It's just a bad one.
I think, there's a lot of English words used in Japanese. It's probably just about well known enough for them to use it in the title of a game. That's also kind of a nonsense title anyway. There's the big ending was an announcement of a new Fire Emblem game, which is called Fortune's Weave, which is a bit of an exciting name.
Sorry, if anyone's interested, the Japanese, I found out the Japanese title.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Pokoa Pokemon. Pokoa Pokemon or Pokopoke in Japanese. So it's not at all Pokopia. It has nothing to do.
So it's not a Utopia reference at all. So no, we haven't been proven wrong.
Does that mean something in Japanese? Like it's...
No.
Okay.
No.
I mean, they call these games Pokemon.
Pokoa Pokemon.
In the
It's the full
West,
name.
it's not that means anything. I mean, in Japan, it's technically called Pocket Monsters, and Pokemon is a shortening of that.
A contraction.
Yeah. But yeah, a new Fire Emblem game called Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. It's kind of Roman themed. Apparently, it's got continuations from Four Houses, which is a well-liked Fire Emblem game. I've never played any of those games. I'm not into tactics games. Hades 2 is coming. It's got its date for the full release. It's been in early access, but the full release, 1.0, September 25th. So that's pretty soon for fans of Hades. Tony Tomodachi.
Yeah, as someone who's not played those games, I was there like, what? I thought that game had been out for like
No,
a
That
year.
is,
people-
I have a bit of a bone to pick with
Yeah, go
Hades
on.
in that way. That like, who's gonna play it now? The whole game is out. Like everyone's who's interested in it has already played it.
Well, I'm sure it's going to have like, I don't know. Look, I don't play open access, early access games for exactly that reason. I want to play the full game when it's out. I've got patience. I can wait for it. But I'm sure it's going to have like a lot more to it when it's properly out than the beta version, whatever. Tomodachi Life is going to be out in spring 2026. This is a weird little game. There was a version of it on the 3DS, and I think even the original DS in Japan only. This is a game a bit like The Sims, but you make the characters as Miis, the Nintendo Mii characters that you can make yourself. And it seems like they're a lot more independent. They just walk around and do stuff themselves a lot more. And also it's very surreal. They have like dreams and have weird, bizarre chats to each other. It's a very weird little game that's kind of Sims-like. So that's coming. And that's kind of most of the really cool stuff, except for the biggest announcement, the weirdest announcement, maybe ever. So they kind of casually announced, oh, we've got two things to announce. One is an update to the Nintendo News app or something. No one gives a shit about that. The second one is an update to Nintendo Switch Online, which is or expansion pack specifically, which is basically where you can access a bunch of old games that you can play that are emulated. So is there going to be some new N64 games? They just introduced GameCube games recently. Is there going to be that? No. They are putting the Virtual Boy onto the Switch and Switch 2.
Whoa.
The Virtual Boy. So people
How are they going to do that?
Well, this is exactly how they're going to do this is the weirdest part of all of it. So the Virtual Boy, for those who don't know, is Nintendo's biggest failure of a console by quite a long way. It's did much worse than even the Wii U. So this was the ostensible successor to the Game Boy, made by the late Gunpei Yokoi, and it was the earliest stage of VR hype. And this console ostensibly is portable like the Game Boy, in that you don't have to plug it in. It ran on batteries, but it's basically on a stand that you have to sit in front of a table and peer into it as a set of goggles in front of you. And it would had the game projected on two little screens in front of your eyes, this kind of red, with this red look to it. This is 1994 or so. I forget the exact year it came out. And 5. And so it doesn't have real 3D in it. Like it's got, as in 3D polygons and stuff. It did have a game called Red Alert, which was like kind of wireframe, a bit like Star Fox or something. But most of the games were 2D sprites that would move around towards and away from you. It was a huge failure. The game
For context on its failure, I've just got some stats here. They, as you say, by far their lowest selling standalone console. They sold 770,000 units. Second place on that list is the Wii U, which sold 13.6 million units.
Yeah.
So by a huge margin, its biggest failure.
Huge failure. Gunpei Yokoi, basically, it was kind of a huge embarrassment. He made the Game Boy, and then he made this, and this was like such a failure. He was kind of drummed out of the company, and he actually, unfortunately, died not very long after that happened, like in a car accident. Or was it?
Suspicious.
Yes, it was a car accident. But anyway, so now they're putting these games on the Switch 2. Now, you may have noticed that the Switch 2 does not have a proper 3D ability, like a stereoscopic 3D ability. So how is that going to work, as you questioned, Ed? The answer is the only way to play this game. Well, there are two different things. You need a separate accessory to play these games. You can't play them just on the system in 2D. It won't let you. Even though they showed footage of it in 2D. In the video, you can't play them. You're not allowed. Instead, the kind of main way they showed off to play it is they will be selling an accessory that is essentially an entire Virtual Boy unit that just doesn't have the electronics inside it. Instead, you flip open the top and slide your Switch or Switch 2 into it, and then you close it up and it's got lenses. So then when you put your face back into the goggles, the game will display, I guess, two side by side on the screen of the Switch, and then the lenses will kind of combine that in your eyesight.
Didn't they do some kind of weird VR experiment with
Nintendo
Breath
Labo.
of the Wild?
Yeah, Nintendo.
Oh, Nintendo Labo.
Yeah, Nintendo they on the Switch they put out this weird
like
set of games that were like you could use the Switch to. You got a bunch of cardboard set up in certain ways, and you would get a guide on how to fold the cardboard together to make these things. And then the Switch would like slide into it, or maybe the controllers would slide into it or something. And you could play these weird games with it. One of them was just a straightforward kind of cardboard setup with some lenses for VR, and you could play some some basic VR games. One of them was Breath of the Wild, which ran at a very low frame rate and was not a very comfortable way to play this game, but was sort of interesting to do. They also have this kind of a similar kind of cardboard VR headset thing in the similar way as that Labo thing that you can also use to play the games with. So you don't have to buy the whole Virtual Boy thing, which apparently I haven't seen how much it costs in UK pounds, but it's $99. So it's $100 to buy this thing.
That's quite
and
a
I
lot.
think it's $30 to buy the cardboard one. And there is no other way to play this. The games that are coming for it are literally almost every game that was released for the Virtual Boy. Something like 20 games came out for this, and 14 games were shown on the screen as the games that are coming out. This includes games like this incredibly obscure game called Shadows over Innsmouth, which is based on Lovecraft and has this weird kind of first-person dungeon crawler game. Like the idea that that's going to be re-released in any way is one of the most bizarre things that has happened in video games, maybe ever.
You said 14. They showed 14 games on the thing.
Yeah.
There were 14 games released in North America for the
in North
Virtual
America,
Boy.
but there are some more games that were released in Japan. That Innsmouth game
22 in total were actually
yeah.
released. 14 in America. So
Yeah.
that maybe is literally the entire US library.
No, because that Innsmouth one was Japan only, so there must be at least one American one missed out. But yeah, it's just a bizarre thing to happen. And I will also remind our listeners that not even that long ago, Nintendo had a console that could do stereoscopic 3D, the 3DS, and they did not put Virtual Boy games on that, even though it would have been convenient to do so. Instead, they're doing it now. It's one of the most bizarre things that has ever happened, and I just wanted to talk at probably too much length about that because it's the way it just genuinely freaked me out, frankly, that they did this. Virtual Boy's back, baby. This is the world we live in.
At last.
Yeah, and that's pretty much
I have a Switch now. I don't want it.
I've got to say, I've wanted a Virtual Boy for a long time. And every day they get harder to get and more expensive. So maybe I will just get this. I also have a 3DS, which is hacked. And there is a Virtual Boy emulator that you can get for the 3DS. And is probably the best way to play those games. So I think what I might do is buy this for the novelty and then just emulate the games on my 3DS. That's what I might end up doing. But yeah. A crazy world we live in. I bet I don't buy amiibos or anything. A bunch of amiibos were announced to this, by the way. Amiibos are back. People were wondering. Seemed like they were moving away from amiibos. Not anymore. They're back on amiibos. And also, they've massively jacked up the price. That's another issue, is that the prices for a lot of these things are quite high. Those two Mario Galaxy games combined, it costs, again, I haven't checked the UK price, but in America, it's $70, which is like a very high. That's the same amount that Tears of the Kingdom cost, for instance, for two games with minimal upgrades that came out on the Wii. Sorry. So Nintendo are making some money. They're making money. But I think that's probably it for the Nintendo Direct. Shall we move on to some less upbeat news? So, although let's admit it, news that is less important than the return of the Virtual Boy. I think we can all agree that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So I'll be reporting on this. Right. So I guess, on Wednesday, September 10th, 2025, so a week ago exactly, as of recording now, Charlie Kirk, right-wing activist and co-founder of nonprofit conservative organization Turning Point USA, was shot once in the neck at Utah Valley University in what was supposed to be the first of a 14-city fall American comeback tour at his infamous Prove Me Wrong table, where Kirk engages in quote-unquote debate about various issues, and he died. He did indeed die later that day. Kirk, for those of you who don't know, made a career advocating for the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, and is quoted as having said the following in defense of his staunch stance on guns, quote, "I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every year so that we can have the Second Amendment." He was a Christian nationalist and was well known for his public debates, most often against university students, such as Jubilee's controversial Surrounded series on YouTube. He also had a wife and kids, which means he's overall a really nice guy. For many,
Yeah.
for many, the way
That's
they learned
how I
about
judge people.
yeah, that's my measuring stick. For many, the way they learned about this news was the spread of the video footage of the shooting itself, as Kirk was on camera at the time it happened. I was lucky enough to not be scrolling at that precise moment because I'm on holiday in South Africa with my family. But many were unfortunate enough to see the high-quality footage of Kirk being shot in his carotid artery, leading to an immediate heavy loss of blood. I don't know. Did either of you guys see it?
No, I managed to avoid it.
Oh, lucky.
Yeah, I saw it.
Unlucky.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, man.
I'm really sorry
No,
because it
that's
is the
all right.
sort of thing you can't unsee, right? It's just the type of
Yeah.
thing you'll never unsee. So I'm sorry about that. And I'm sorry to anyone else listening who also happened to see it. So whilst I'm not particularly sympathetic to Charlie Kirk as a person, I think we can all say that, I'm able to acknowledge the severity this sort of public execution indicates about the state of U.S. politics and politics globally. Speculation about the politics of the shooter were immediately set alight and spreading all over the internet. Was this another instance of a disturbed individual with equally disturbed politics, such as the attempted assassination of Donald Trump? Was this an allegedly personally motivated revenge killing, such as in the case of alleged United Healthcare CEO assassin and alleged heartthrob Luigi Mangione?
I mean, he's definitely a heartthrob. That's
Definitely a heartthrob.
No one can take that
No
away
one
from
can
him.
contest that. Or was this a radical leftist moving as part of a video game and meme-obsessed organized anti-fascist movement, finally giving the Trump administration all the evidence it needs to crack down on progressive organizations across the country?
I will say,
Well,
Sophie,
it
sorry,
would-
you did miss one other possibility, which was floated by Elon Musk.
Oh, I'm getting
that it
there.
was a transgender sleeper cell.
I'm getting
that
there.
did it. Okay.
Oh, I'm getting there.
Sorry to preempt you. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I know that you said Antifa rather than Transtifa, so I'm not sure where you're getting your facts from, Sophie. Keep going, sorry.
Well, it would appear to depend on who you ask and where you look for your news on the killing. Important to mention is the extreme swiftness with which the right attempted to pin the shooting on a trans person by connecting two tweets from someone who was not the suspect ultimately arrested and an unrelated photo of a transgender woman with a viral
Wow.
tweet the day before. Just complete made-up nonsense. Yeah. On Thursday, 11th September, authorities arrested a 22-year-old Utah resident, Tyler Robinson, after a supposed tip-off from his reportedly Republican family members. Bullet casings were discovered at the scene with messages carved into them, a potential copycat of the United Healthcare CEO assassination, and the media was swept into a frenzy attempting to decipher what they mean. They were initially described as having, quote, transgender and anti-fascist ideology, unquote, by even the New York Times that later had to publish an updated correction. The challenge for these messages being that the messages are steeped in deep Chan and meme culture that even the most perpetually online netizens, such as myself, really struggled to understand. The problem with this type of internet culture is memes are intended to be understood immediately and are often cynical, post jokes surrounding an original meme from potentially decades earlier in internet history. So if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. The references in question on the bullet casings in Tyler Robinson's case are so boiled in post-ironic internet humor that many media outlets are either unintentionally or intentionally misconstruing their true intentions, which I would argue are not meaningfully intentional at all. The messages found on the unfired casings were as follows, quote, "Hey fascist, catch," with an up arrow, a right arrow, and 3 down arrows, which some of our listeners may recognize to be the code entered by Helldivers 2 players to call in the Eagle 500 kg bomb that deals significant damage to a small area in-game. We'll return to this in just a moment, as you can see why that would be relevant. Another message read lyrics from the Italian folk song Bella Ciao, now commonly recognized as an anti-fascist anthem. Oh, bella ciao, 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 ciao. And finally, if you read this, you are gay, LMAO. So, Shakespeare. The spent casing from the bullet that hit Kirk was inscribed with the meme, quote, "Notices bulges, oh whoa, what's this?" quote, referencing a Chan meme, which was intended to mock members of the online furry community. Some media outlets mistakenly reported him as being part of the furry community. I think we have reason to believe that he was probably dunking on furries, or at least referencing a meme that dunks on furries, even if he's not actually specific. He's just sort of, again, indicating to an in-group that he's part of that in-group as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Also, it's worth pointing out that meme is also like ancient. It's like from
it's so old. It's so
2013
old.
or something. So
deep,
it's kind of
deep internet.
It's odd that he would even use that, even within the realm of putting memes
especially because he's
on his
22, but it's just deep. That's the thing. It's just so channy. It's just so channy.
Especially because he's 22. Like, that's quite a percentage of his life ago.
Yeah.
So the problem with these messages and the way legacy media are reporting on them is that they're being interpreted sincerely and with zero understanding or explanation of the ironic context Robinson likely invoked them. Although we can't know for sure, but judging from the memes used, how much of internet you would have to use to know about them, let alone understand them at this point, probably, right? So to that end, media operations are reporting on the shooter as being quote-unquote anti-fascist due to his reference to anti-fascist song Bella Ciao, as likely queer or involved in online queer culture due to the in fact likely derogatory use of a Chan furry meme, and as a gamer from his reference to the Helldivers 2 video game. So as we know, video games have long been cited as a leading cause for gun violence, a narrative especially pushed by the gun industry's lobbyist group, the National Rifle Association, most notably high school seniors Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold of the notorious Columbine school shooting in April 1999. Both played the popular video games Doom and Quake, which quickly took center stage as an explanation for their violent ideations instead of their other wide-ranging cultural interests, trouble with bullying, and intense interests in bombs and firearms, of which there was a lot of evidence to point towards. According to Polygon, of the 100 most deadly school massacres in modern history, 40 took place in the United States. 7 of those took place before the era of video games in American life. In only 4 of the remaining 33 mass murders, perpetrators were definitely identified as being fans of video games, which makes sense given that games are almost universally popular among young men, the primary culprits of mass shootings. As we well know as gamers, most of these horrific acts of violence are usually committed by young people. Young people statistically play video games. It is a classic case of causation being confused for correlation. There's been many studies to disprove the connection between violent video games and the acts of violence in real life. But as most of us also well know as leftists, pundits will use any angle to redirect attention from these horrific acts of gun violence from the extremely available tools used to commit them, i.e. guns, to the personal lives and interests of the persons committing them, i.e. their race, gender, sexual orientation, or political beliefs. I'm sure they're not alone, that whenever events like these happen, I just sit there hoping that the shooter is just another statistically likely young white man with a confused trail of politics and a history of antisocial behavior, because that's usually the case. In the event that the shooter isn't a minority race, the media can twist to portray as an indication of a larger racial violence issue, or that the shooter isn't trans, or that the shooter isn't gay. They will usually lean on more common and repetitive lines of defense in order to protect the interests of capital, the gun industry, and the right-wing status quo, such as violent video games. This leads me back to the Helldivers 2 meme in question. Hey fascist, catch up, right, down, down, down. It's so frustratingly easy for mainstream media outlets to connect this to an interest in violent video games. This was after some media outlets mistakenly connected down, down, down as a reference to Antifa, which is very funny.
I mean, it's so the 3 arrows, but the 3 arrows are diagonal, so that would be diagonal left, down, but down. It's not even
such
right.
A stretch. It's such a stretch. Whereas in actuality, it was likely the shooter's ironic reference to bomb bombing, whatever minor problem inconveniences your life, as well as the video game itself. Another example of this meme being used, for example, is a Twitter user posting a picture of a spider in their house with the caption, "What should I do?" And another user commenting, "I would upright down, down, down," in response, calling for the ironically disproportionate response of dropping a 500 kg bomb on the gentle home invader of the spindly variety. Helldivers 2 is a game so steeped in irony itself that gamers from both sides of the political spectrum argued at the time of release over who the intended audience of the game was. I remember leftists believing that the game's tone was clearly intended to mock right-wing gun nuts with its intentional stylistic references to American military recruitment ads and threats of spreading freedom and democracy. And rightists believing that the game's tone is actually post-ironic in such a way as to make fun of leftists, indiscriminately name-calling all of their enemies fascists. So what are the actual politics of Tyler Robinson, the suspect arrested for Charlie Kirk's murder? He was unaffiliated with any political party and had no record of ever having voted. All of the bullet shell casings can be traced back to Chan culture, which leads overwhelmingly right-wing generally. Even the evocation of the song Bella Ciao can be linked back to a remix of the song, El Professor Bella Ciao Huge L Remix, appearing on a Spotify playlist titled Groiper Wars America First. Groipers, for those of you who don't know, are a mostly online community. Groipers are a mostly online community of alt-right, white Christian nationalists, effectively led by Nick Fuentes, whose main gripe, or groip, should I say, is that far-right Republicans are not far-right enough that specifically targeted Charlie Kirk as representative of this trend in modern conservative discourse. Even the leaked Discord messages from a server Tyler Robinson was allegedly involved in, reported on by Ken Klippenstein on Substack, images that Klippenstein says mainstream media refused to publish, do not appear to have much to offer about Tyler as a person. Many of the other users in the Discord are attempting to grapple with the meaning of Robinson's act of violence, just as the rest of the world is. He was described by friends as generally well-liked, amiable, just fairly unlike some other, well-known shooters in history that have a record of being quite, socially isolated and loner types. He posted in the Discord server in question about video games, yes, but also memes, life updates, the weather, the US election in fairly unbiased terms, and even a couple of references I identified to be potentially r/I'm sorry John related, which is a subreddit dedicated to the interpretation that Garfield the cartoon cat exists only to torment John Arbuckle in a Lovecraftian perpetual living hell. I own an artwork from this subreddit. I will not elaborate.
Oh, wow. Wow, now I'm worried about
Those who know, It seems to me that if Tyler Robinson is indeed the alleged shooter, he is yet another case of a young man radicalized by far-right accelerationism, fueled by a nihilistic black pill Chan interest in watching the world and everyone in it burn, basically just sort of doing it for the meme, for the chaos of it all. If we want to trace this back to something, we can trace it fairly easily back to the alienating nature of capitalism, the most lethal casualties of which appear increasingly to be young white men with access to guns and online communities that venerate their struggles as being the cause of minorities, immigrants, and women, and not the increasingly crushing economic landscape we all find ourselves in that prioritizes corporate millions over starving millions. But sure, let's blame it on the video games.
I guess the only other thing on that for me is I think you've done a really good job of putting together the stuff that we currently know, but also there's still a lot of stuff that we don't know. So it would be difficult to be too authoritative with any one interpretation.
Yes,
we're recording this Wednesday. It's going to go up on Monday.
Yes.
I'm sure even by then there'll be a bunch of stuff. Like just today, there's a bunch of stuff about him having apparently a trans partner and like the right are going crazy with that. Yeah, it's hard to even say even if they really are
again,
partners,
it's really
and
hard
if they
to
really
tell
are
if
trans,
that's just regular trans.
If any element of that is
Factual.
even true on any level, not that him having a trans partner would even really mean anything, but just it's such a mess, and the right wing in America are so, and even here, unfortunately, are so desperate to make this the biggest deal imaginable. We were just saying before we were recording that, people were talking about having moments of silence here in the UK. For this guy who was barely known here.
I mean, some of the responses have been just hugely objectionable, right? Like Boris Johnson's tweet. Did you see that? Former Prime Minister said that Charlie Kirk was killed for
some of the stuff he said
saying common sense. I mean, some of Charlie Kirk's public positions were diabolical.
Yeah, actually diabolical.
He was against. He was against the Civil Rights Act. From the
he was against the Civil Rights Act. He
was
designed trans people
explicitly
as mentally
racist from
delusional.
my perspective.
Yeah.
The idea that a former prime minister of the United Kingdom would describe that as common sense.
And even the current prime minister did put out a remark of condolence for a guy who has very few links to the UK, and again, almost no one here had even heard of. Yeah, it's bizarre, and like
People are losing their jobs
Yeah.
for like, saying that
cancel
they didn't
culture's
feel
back,
empathy for
baby.
this guy, probably mostly in America. Yeah, it is just shocking. Obviously, there's so much discourse. I know, obviously, I'm sure you've all even
Yeah.
seen like stories and stuff from our friends,
Yeah.
either being like, yeah, I don't agree with him, but like, doesn't mean he should have been murdered and stuff like that. And it's like, I don't necessarily, I also don't agree with him. I'm also not going to cry that he's dead. I don't think it should have been a public execution. I don't think that's how, but also,
I mean, I've
it's
seen
just kind of
God knows how
bizarre.
many dead children I've seen in Gaza now.
I know exactly, right? Yeah.
I'm my sympathies are limited in life,
Pretty
But
desensitized at this point. They
yeah.
really are just sort of frothing at the mouth.
Yeah.
But, exercise caution, I guess, to listeners, exercise caution, because, this is the point where our sort of really, really fast news cycle is most at its sort of vicious and disadvantaged in terms of like loads of news outlets will publish information as soon as they have it. People will read that first, and then that will be a version of the story that they remember the best, even
Yeah.
if the New York Times or
Yeah.
whoever does post a correction about it afterwards. It doesn't really matter. And the right are just absolutely frothing at the mouth to get. Finally, they just want
Yeah,
a
yeah.
leftist shooter, even though they don't understand
Yeah.
that's so.
I mean,
that would be so unbelievable. In that, like, we're the ones saying that guns shouldn't be a thing. It would just be so ironic and
Yeah.
But yeah, also similar to like Luigi Mangione as well, because I feel like when his politics start to come out, and as his sort of people started digging on his Facebook and his Twitter and stuff, just got really confusing. He was just kind of a confusing guy. His politics were really very inconsistent, but that also kind of indicates the sort of person who does something like this. Their politics are gonna be inconsistent and weird.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I, like most people, have had like vague, kind of daydreams of like, oh man, what if I just fucking killed that guy I hate politically, right? Well, I did, just like kind of vaguely. And then my initial initial thought is, oh, I would completely destroy the leftist movement if I did that. If like I'm someone with plenty of ties to leftist organizations and stuff, and if I did, assassinate someone,
they would
is
all
that they'd
get
all get
prescribed.
prescribed.
Yeah.
Like lots of people I know.
Yeah, we would get banned. Maybe you should, because then our podcast would get a bump in popularity. People would seek it out.
That's true.
It would
That's
make
true.
this podcast
Would they let
much
me do
harder
it from
for one
prison?
thing.
Maybe they would. Maybe one of you guys would have to edit it though. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, so just like, even this kind of daydreamy thing, like, oh, I immediately realized, why I absolutely shouldn't do that as a leftist. So that leaves people who aren't really connected to, and I think that's true, basically anyone on the left in any real kind of organizational capacity. So that just leaves people who don't really have very coherent politics and vaguely think that things are bad and see a guy on TV they think is maybe cause of that. And frankly, probably it's, I mean, my from what the little we picked up, my kind of guess is that he doesn't even care that much about Charlie Kirk, doesn't like him, but was just like mainly just wanted to kill a famous person, and this guy happened to come to his town. And that's what happened with the Trump shooter, I believe.
Yeah, my read is just that it's just standard school shooting stuff, where it wasn't really about who they murder or their manifesto or anything. They don't particularly have it's just like this very sort of really, really melted part of the internet where it is just sort of doing it for the memes. Like, I don't know.
It's worth pointing out also there was like another school shooting, like I think an hour after Charlie Kirk got
the
killed.
Same day.
Which was like a regular school shooting of just some children who died. And, no one cares. And like there's certainly no flags at half-mast for that. Yeah.
Plus, there were the Democrats that got attacked a few months ago. That had very little pickup in the news.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on over there, and I'm not sure the response from the political class is particularly designed to de-escalate. In fact, it feels like the exact opposite. And why am I even hedging? They clearly were designed going for the exact opposite. In fact,
they were
bloodthirsty responses, especially for trans people, immediately after the shooting, when we knew nothing about who the shooter was or anything like that. It was completely disgusting and inappropriate to see people, including the president of the United States of America, engage in that.
I would just say, like, one last thing: that the gaming angle is like interesting. It seems like he wasn't like a super gamer or anything. I guess he liked Helldivers,
like a casual
I
gamer.
suppose. But like, and also I think literally just before we started recording, I saw a tweet that apparently he had a in Counter-Strike, you can get guns that have public stats on them that people can watch and see how many kills they got with the guns. And he apparently had one of those. He did not get many kills with that gun, so it seems like weird they'd go to that trouble. So I guess he's just a kind of a general, teenage boy. Is he a teenager? I'm not sure. Young man.
22.
22. Young man, and I'm sure when he was a
22.
teenager a couple of years ago, just general gamer guy. But it's remarkable how few people in the news media know even the first thing about this stuff. Even when, we talked a bit about on here about how Gamergate was a huge deal politically, even outside of gaming spaces, but like it came from the gaming space, and like that, some people claim, I don't know if I 100% agree, but like say that Donald Trump would never have got elected in the first place if it wasn't for Gamergate. These things are genuinely important. They're huge cultural touchstones for millions of people, especially younger people. And I mean, not even that young anymore, and I know this stuff. And it's just ridiculous that like these huge news organizations don't have the first idea about this stuff. I mean, that the three arrows down means anti-fascism was the most ridiculous thing I've seen in a long time. And it's just embarrassing to them. Maybe one day we'll have a better.
Yeah. A lot of the research I collected was mostly because I found like news articles just generally quite unhelpful in terms of actually interrogating what the messages on the bullets meant. So a lot of my research drove me to like Polygon, a place that knows games, or YouTubers, a place that know like weird internet stuff, and also the QAA podcast, who also do conspiracy and like deep internet shit, right? So like these are the people that know this stuff. Like I would have, later I would have, I'm sure Taylor Lorenz and stuff will post something about this, and then it'll be a lot more insightful, right? Of just like how cooked sort of internet this is.
In America, it's basically Taylor Lorenz and Ken Klippenstein are like the only decent journalists who know anything vaguely about any of this stuff. It's bizarre, but like, I mean, if you'd put a movie quote on one of these bullets, they would have identified that immediately, and it would have been talking about this movie.
Yeah.
Instead, they
also scary as well that inspiring this sort of copycat style of the bullet casings, because like you feasibly could write literally anything and pin whatever you want on those bullet casings, just like writing a manifesto and just pretending it was your leftist ideology that drove you to do it. So there's also a bit of a creeping fear of that as well.
Yeah, it's bizarre, the lack of literacy in the sort of mainstream about video games. I mean, the highest grossing franchise in human history is Pokemon. It's grossed nearly double the second place, which is
genuinely, how many Pokemon do you think those journalists could name? I bet most of them couldn't even do Pikachu, right? And I mean, again, you said that it's huge, it's almost ubiquitous, but they live in a weird bubble. I mean, the UK journalists are even more in a bubble than the American ones, I think. But I guess luckily this didn't happen here. But yeah. So I think on that low note, let's have a higher note, a fun story, an Ed flavored story. bring me the sunshine. Ed.
Thank you again. I just thank Sofie again for taking the actual difficult story with stakes.
Don't say taking the bullet. That's probably not a good thing to say.
Don't do that. Yeah, consider this one dessert. This is the story of Randy Pitchford, who has had some very strange responses to criticisms of Borderlands 4. So Borderlands 4 came out a few days ago on the 12th, which is 5 days ago as we were recording. I've never played a Borderlands game. Have you guys?
I played 1 and 2. I enjoyed them enough, but the humor was running thin by the end of 2, and I never played any more than that.
People didn't seem to like 3 very much, so it sounds like you probably stopped
at
about the right place.
The Tales of the Borderlands Telltale game.
I played a little bit of 3.
So for the uninitiated, they're a sort of FPS action RPG roguelike kind of thing developed by Gearbox Software, and they've been coming out since 2009. Borderlands 4 has been pretty well received by critics. It's got 84 on Metacritic at the moment, and it's had a huge amount of consecutive players. It's broken Borderlands records. They had over 300,000 on Steam this weekend playing, which is a lot. However, a lot of gamers have taken issue with how poorly the game runs. The user review score on Metacritic, for comparison, is 4.6 out of 10. And people have got all kinds of issues with like the performance. They've identified poor frame rates. They've had lots of crashes. Console players have been complaining about the lack of a field of view slider, which means some players are experiencing motion sickness. It's just sort of poorly optimized across the board, has been the general response from a lot of players. Now, the Gearbox development chief, Randy Pitchford, has been responding to these criticisms uh, in quite a bizarre way. You might imagine he's quite a senior person in a big company. You might imagine he's been media trained or something, or I don't know, knows how to do comms. Guess not. But I just want to say something before we get into that exactly. I just want to club up. There are a couple of other controversies around Randy Pitchford that I'm not going to talk about. I'm just going to mention them here, and then we're going to move on. Allegedly, he left a USB drive containing sensitive Gearbox information and child pornography at the Medieval Times in 2014. This was strongly denied. They sued their accusers, and the accusers countersued and all that kind of stuff, and ultimately both sides dropped their suits. So I cannot tell you the truth of that accusation. I do not know, but just making you aware of that, dear listener, if you want to look further into it yourself. He was also accused of physically shoving voice actor David Eddings from the Borderlands game, which meant that he then didn't return for Borderlands 3. Pitchford has denied this assault, and Gearbox has sort of made no further comment on it. So those are the two other more controversial things. So let's
I will also say just about Randy Pitchford. He's also just famously a very, let's say, flamboyant figure. He's obsessed with magic, and he insists on doing magic tricks for people and like journalists, and they always talk about how much they hate his magic tricks. And he wears these very loud shirts to like game trade shows and stuff like that.
He's certainly got form on this as well.
Yeah.
When I said earlier you might expect him to respond more professionally, that would be if you didn't know who Randy Pitchford was.
Yeah.
So let's go into these specific ones. So like I said, one of the criticisms which was there on launch day was about the lack of FOV sliders on consoles. And he responded basically saying that that's deliberate, and the reason why would that it would introduce some unfairness to add an FOV slider. This is a very strange take, given that this is not a competitive game. It's a PvE shooter. So,
and also it's on the PC where it is on the PC.
And it's on the PV.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, there's another criticism from console players about the motion blur in the game. There's too much motion blur and it's making the game feel weird. And he says, well, there is no motion blur in this game. It must be your TV creating the impression of motion blur. But the PC version has the option to remove motion blur. So why would it have that if there's no motion blur in the game? And so that was day one. That was the launch day. He tweeted those strange responses. And since then, it's only got more bizarre. A few days after the game came out, he tweeted in response to continued criticism, quote, "Every PC gamer must accept the reality of the relationship between their hardware and what the software they're running is doing. The game is pretty damn optimal, which means that the software is doing what we want." So that I will interject there. I mean, a very strange response to your game's not working properly is actually the game's pretty damn optimal and is doing exactly what we want. If you say so, I mean, that's not a very convincing response to a complaint. He goes on to say in the same thread, with Borderlands 4, every PC gamer has a lot of tools to balance their preferences between FPS, resolution, and rendering features. If you aren't happy with the balance between these things you're experiencing, please tune your preference using the tools available to you. Which, I mean, just feels hugely condescending.
Yeah.
There's people telling you the game's not working.
That's
and they're like,
patronizing.
well, have you tried the settings? Like, yeah, bro, I imagine people have tried the settings.
We tried turning it off and on again.
I mean, it's just not a very convincing response to a public complaint about a product you've literally just put out. And he's continued with that line. I mean, that was a couple of days ago, and it's just continued in that way.
He
said, if you have anything less than the recommended hardware, you shouldn't expect the game to run at its high settings. And then he went on to say, if that last post made you have a negative reaction, I bet you have emotions and expectations that you feel aren't sufficiently attended to. I'm sorry, but please accept that the game is doing a lot and running pretty optimally, and you may have to either accept some trade-offs between FPS features and resolution as your preference, or you will continue to be disappointed. Again, just making it the player's problem. It's like, it's your fault for expecting the game to run well. You should lower your expectations or you'll be disappointed. And that, I cannot imagine that is what any comms team would be recommending that people say. And speaking of things that you wouldn't recommend saying if you were giving this guy advice, the thing that's really made the news recently is he's just been recommending that people get a refund. Not great. not great advertisement.
Oh.
He's been saying, if you don't like how it performs, get a refund. To quote directly, for people who want to play now, people who want to play later can play later, and people can even get a refund after buying and trying if they're not satisfied. Those are the options. My advice is to users is to accept reality and tune, or to not play. And he mentioned in another tweet that you should probably refund it, and then you could buy it in a few years' time when it's probably cheaper and your hardware can probably run it better. I mean, yeah, that's kind of good advice. It's not advice that you should give if you're the person trying to sell that game.
Yeah.
And yeah, a couple more ones I want to give in a similar line. He said, I would not put a Ferrari engine in a monster truck and expect it to drive like a Ferrari. If you tell me about your specification, I can help you optimize your performance. I'm sorry you don't like being told to use DLSS, but that is the way. If you're not happy using the tools available to you to improve frame rate, and you're not happy with the frame rate you have, you should play a different game. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Wow.
And we're not the first people to notice this, obviously. People have pointed out to him,
Incredible.
dude, you're being a bit of a dick. This is pretty condescending. And he says, I'm trying to be helpful. What do you think would be helpful? What would you have me do? He says, as though, like, I just enjoyed that. What would you have me do? Like, just don't tweet this. I don't know what to tell you.
What would you have me do?
I mean, realistically,
And
all
here's
that.
the
What do you
final
want
quote.
from
Yeah,
me?
Go
My
for it,
final quote from him is the most definitive one, and I think it is basically accurate. He said, the game is the game. Please get a refund from Steam if you aren't happy with it. And yes, that is good advice. This is all correct. Do try different settings, buy it on sale instead, upgrade your PC, refund the game. But this is all a bit of a piss take coming from the developers of the game.
Yeah.
If hundreds of people come to you with a complaint, it's very like pig-headed of you to assume that they hadn't considered these very basic, obvious steps before they made their complaint. And I can really see why this is pissing people off. The last thing, I guess, there have been some patches to the game, but people aren't really sure what they do. One that's just come out is said that the patch is to improve stability, but it didn't come with any patch notes, so people aren't really sure what it does, which is quite strange. And yeah, just to finish off, this is just a really weird way of behaving in a professional setting, right? Like, this is the guy's job. Like, if any of us spoke like this at work to people who had made a complaint, you wouldn't be in that job very long. This is very strange, and the sort of thing that you can only do if you're very high up in an organization. Yeah, it's very strange responses.
What's weird about it is that, like, he's basically acting as if he's like a beloved figure that, you know, like, I don't know, let's say Gabe Newell. Yeah, people love Gabe Newell. Maybe they shouldn't. He's a bit of a weird guy in some ways. But, you know, he's very popular and beloved. And if he kind of threw his weight around a bit, people would be like, oh, you know, Gabe, I do love that guy. Ultimately. Meanwhile, fucking Randy Pitchford, I think even people who like Borderlands think Randy Pitchford is a bit of a wanker. You know, as I said, he's got a flamboyant style that seems to the kind of guy who really thinks he's a hilarious and lovable dude that no one thinks is hilarious or lovable. I will say, I think just before we start recording, I did also see that there was yet another bug found. Apparently, in the console version, there's what's called a memory leak, which means basically the longer the game stays running, the slower it gets. And apparently he just said, yeah, just turn it on and off again, mate. Basically, yeah, don't have to do that. Yeah. Yeah, he all they really had to do was put out like a very boilerplate message that was like, oh yeah, so we've heard some people have had technical issues. We're working on a patch. And this literally no one would have noticed. The game sold very well. It would have been fine. You know, they would have totally got away with it. And, you know, and eventually the game will be patched and people's computers will be better and it won't be an issue anymore. But like, no, he just decided to just humiliate himself in front of everyone. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I wonder if, it's like kind of what you were saying there, Alex. I wonder if this is part of an attempt to become like more of a known personality. Do you know what I mean? To like occupy that role of the sort of person that the average gamer knows.
Yeah.
There aren't that many like big studio people that the average gamer knows. Gabe Newell, you just gave a good example, but like, and maybe it's this causing this kind of controversy that makes you ascend to that level. So maybe this is more deliberate than I've said, but I don't know. Also, maybe not.
I doubt it. I don't think he's capable of that level of self-reflection.
I guess it would go with the sort of the more flamboyant elements of his personal presentation, though.
I will say, I think maybe that's about happening is that someone was holding him back from defending the Borderlands movie online, and now he's got free reign. So he's lashing out because that movie was fucking terrible by all accounts and was a huge flop. I was frankly kind of hoping that the failure of the movie would portend a failure of Borderlands 4, but sadly not. Well, I do think we're done. An exciting episode of Silksong and political assassinations. Don't get that as a combination very often. Probably never again in our podcast history will that happen. Hopefully, mainly because Silksong's already out. I suppose we'll maybe talk about it again when some of us have finished it. Hopefully, there's not a political assassination at that time. But, stay safe out there, everyone. Watch out. But we will be wrapping up. So for now, I've been Alex. You can find me on Twitter at AlexDean, AlexDuin, and Blue Sky at alexdean.bsky.social. Ed, how can people find you?
You can find me at Not a Lemon on Blue Sky and at Still Not a Lemon on X. Sofie?
South Africa, but I Twitch stream 4 times a week. My new schedule, though, on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. So you can catch me there.
And what's the address?
Twitch.tv/SoFreely.
Well done.
Thanks.
As always, we desperately beg you to share us online. I mean, I don't know. I mean, literally, I'm going to start donating blood and selling the blood to people who prove that they've shared us online. I'll do it. You want my blood.
Okay.
You know you want it. And you can do so by sharing.
What type are you?
I'm AB rhesus negative. Yeah. That's all. I can take blood from anyone, but it's not useful to anyone else. It's the selfish person's
So
blood.
you're a vampire.
Yeah, I'm a vampire. You got me.
Sofie and I have shared every episode of this podcast, I think. So you owe us quite a lot of blood.
Yep.
Yeah, you do. You two don't count. You can share us on Twitter at Red Barrels Pod and on Blue Sky at redbarrelspodcast.bsky.social.
And don't worry, Alex was joking about the blood. He's not going to give you any blood or anything weird like that.
It's
Just
fine.
share it
Don't
and
worry.
you'll be happy. There'll be no blood. I promise there'll be no blood.
We promise
I'm
to
not gonna
not
force my
send
blood on
Alex's
anyone.
blood if you
That
share
goes
the
without
episode.
saying.
If you share the episode, Alex won't send you his blood.
Look, man, my blood, it can be a collector's item. I'm just saying. This podcast is going somewhere, and one day you could say you own Alex's blood from the back beforehand. Could do.
Certainly going somewhere.
It's not just been us talking. There's also been some fantastic music from Brilliant Drink. As always, go check out their stuff. I think I may have forgotten to mention this last time, so I apologize to Brilliant Drink if that was the case. But that really is it. We are done. So for that, I will say goodbye.
Bye.
We did it.